All right, good morning. I'm Charlotte Mitchell, Chair of the Utilities Commission, and with me this morning are Commissioners Brown Bland, Gray, Clodfelter, Duffley, Hughes, and McKissick. We're here this morning to receive updates on the work of the Affordability Collaborative, which was convened by the Commission in its order accepting stipulations, granting partial rate increase, and requiring customer notice, issued on March 31st, 2021, in docket number E-7, subs 1214, 1213, and 1187, as well as its order accepting stipulations, granting partial rate increase, and requiring customer notice, issued on April 16th in docket number E-2, subs 1219 and 1193. In those orders, the DEC order and the DEP order, the Commission directed DEC and DEP to convene a stakeholder process tasked with addressing affordability, established a timeline for that process, and which included deadlines for the periodic reporting and filing of recommendations to the Commission. Since the issuance of the DEC and DEP orders, the Commission has issued orders directing the participation of both PSNC as well as Piedmont Natural Gas in the Affordability Collaborative. In the DEC and DEP orders, the Commission directed the utilities and the public staff to file reports that briefly summarize the progress made to date within 90 days and again within 180 days of the date of those orders. On June 4th, 2021, the 90-day report was filed, and then on September 27th, 2021, the 180-day report was filed. It was reported that the Affordability Collaborative held a kickoff meeting on July 29th, 2021, and then a second meeting on September 16th, 2021. Recently, on January 18th of 2022, a quarterly progress report was filed in which it was reported to the Commission that the collaborative had met on November 12th and on December 9th of 2021. The quarterly report explains that the participants in the collaborative have been organized into 4 sub-teams to address the issues outlined by the Commission in the DEC order and the DEP order. The quarterly report identifies each sub-team as well as the persons named as co-leaders for those sub-teams. To further the goal of keeping the Commission apprised of the progress of the collaborative, the Commission has requested a briefing today by the co-leaders of each of the 4 sub-teams. Each sub-team will be allowed 10 minutes for its presentation. The session is being transcribed by our court reporter, and the transcript will be filed in these dockets, those dockets in which the reports have also been filed. All right, with that, we will begin with sub-team A. I believe we will hear from Rory McElmoyle as well as Arnie Richardson. All right, Mr. Richardson, I see you on camera. So you may proceed, sir.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. So I am with Duke Energy and co-leading sub-team A with Rory. I want to give you an update on where we are today. So we have been tasked to prepare an assessment of current affordability challenges facing our residential customers. In the Commission order, there were several different demographics and housing characteristics that we were asked to analyze. This includes race, age, income, housing type, heating source, family size, housing value, and location. We do not collect most of this data on our customers, so we did have to reach out to a third-party company, Axiom, to get this customer-level information. This is primarily a marketing source of data, so there are some data quality issues, but it did allow us to have enough confidence in it to move forward with completing this analysis. I will mention that age is the only thing that we do collect from our customers, so we do know age of the house, age of the account holder in our billing system. From there, we were asked to segment our customers by different federal poverty levels, which we have done. We have looked at customers below the 150% FPL, between 150% and 200% as directed. We also looked at customers above the 200% level for comparison reasons. And we were fortunate enough that Duke Energy and the Department of Health and Human Services were able to enter a data share agreement to be able to analyze customers receiving assistance from Low-Income Energy Assistance Program and Crisis Intervention Program. So we had those customers as a 4th segment. We were asked to look at various trends and patterns on our low-income customers. So we were able to analyze arrears, average energy usage, their average bill, past due amounts, disconnect for non-pays, energy intensity, which is measured by kWh per square foot of the home, as well as we were able to look at different seasonal impacts for our customers. Throughout this process, we have taken an agile approach. So we have delivered 3 different versions of our analytics. After delivering the first version, which was really focused on what was specifically asked for in the commission order, we asked the collaborative to help us identify other things that may impact affordability, and we have been doing an ongoing analytics in this process. We are getting ready to release a 4th version of the analytics in the coming weeks. This will include things like looking at the disconnect non-pay notifications, electric burden, and mobile homes. We're also doing a statistical analysis that will enhance the descriptive analytics that we have done, so we can understand some of the relationships between these variables, these different demographics of our low incomes, and hopefully understand affordability even better. When it comes to our final deliverable of an assessment for affordability, we have developed a draft of that with Subteam A and shared that with the rest of the collaborative. This is a draft because as we deliver more of the analytics in the coming weeks, we do plan to revise this assessment. But overall, we have received positive feedback from the collaborative. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Rory, who will talk a little bit about our initial findings from this assessment.
Thank you. Yeah, so just at kind of a high level, the DEC-DEP analysis found that overall, a little over a quarter of all residential accounts qualified as low income, meaning being below 200% of the federal poverty level, with 17% falling under, a combined 17% falling under 150% of FPL. And for all of those that fall under 200%, that amounts to roughly 670,000 residential accounts during the analytical period of 2019 to 2020. Additionally, over 15% of all customers met the arrears definition developed by the company, which is defined as 2 months spent at double the average bill overdue, or 6 months spent at least one time behind on their average bill. And it's useful to point out that 60% of the customers who were captured by that arrears definition were not low income. And so that just points to the fact that being low income doesn't necessarily mean that, or not being low income doesn't mean that you're not going to be struggling with your, with being able to pay your electric bill. Additionally, energy intensity, or the amount of electricity and kilowatt hours used per square foot on an annual basis, seems to be a driving factor in total energy bills, but also as it relates to arrears and disconnect for non-pay. Low-income households, specifically those LIHEAP SIP recipients, as well as arrears struggling households, have a much higher energy intensity than non-low-income and non-arrears households, as do rural households, younger customers living in low-value housing, multifamily households, and also rental households. And that energy intensity factor is likely in part due to inefficient housing, poor insulation, et cetera, as well as inefficient appliances and heating and cooling systems. Seasonal energy intensity is pretty pronounced and drives the higher bills in the winter the winter, but also the summer to a lesser extent. And for low-income households and those LIHEAP SIP recipients, as well as arrears struggling households, you definitely see the energy intensity being double or more non-low-income households in the wintertime. Again, likely due to inefficient housing. And finally, the data show that there are racial disparities in the experience of being in arrears and disconnected for non-pay. But in general, and this is, well, it's important to point out that the companies do apply NC Rule 1211 consistently, regardless of racial status. But regardless, we are seeing disparities in how African American and Hispanic households experience arrears and disconnects for non-pay that is not explained solely by income. So that's something that we're hoping to learn more about during that deeper statistical analysis. And I believe that is all.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. At this point, I will I have a few questions for you all, and I'll check in with my colleagues to see if there are any additional questions for you all. Just trying to drill down a bit on some of the statistics you all have provided today. I'm looking at this in the preview of initial findings box where it says 2% of customers are LIEP SIP customers. And then it goes on to list the percentages that are significant percentages FPL, below FPL. Uh, what help me understand sort of that big. It would seem to me that 2% is low. 2% of those customers who are receiving LIEP is low relative to those customers that are significant percentages below FPL. Am I understanding that correctly? Is that really a disparity? Because that's how I'm understanding it. If I'm understanding it incorrectly, please let me know.
Arnie, if I could take a first crack at that. So that 2% is the way that the customers were accounted for is the companies worked with the Department of Health and Human Services, Housing and Human Services, to identify those customers, but they were looking at a 2021 list of LIEP and SIP recipients. And so they received a list and looked backwards to the 2019 to 2020 analytical period. And so only customers who were customers of the company in the 2019 to 2020 period that were also still customers and received LIEP SIP assistance in 2021 were captured there. So there's going to be some attrition. Additionally, and Arnie, correct me if I'm wrong, it only includes customers who received assistance for their electric bill. And so you're likely to also have a number of customers not captured because they might have they might be a Duke Energy customer, but went to get assistance, LIEP SIP assistance for non-electric heating bills. And so that's going to be a bare minimum. But at the same time, overall across the state, we see a situation where the funding runs out very quickly. And so a lot of folks aren't able to get that assistance. And it's only available for a select few number of months of the year. So there's a number of other factors that would come into play. Arnie, anything to add on that?
The only thing I'll add is that we did do our study on 2019 to 2020 to get those 12 months before the pandemic. We did not want to do this analysis while the pandemic was going. So that's a little bit why the timeframes do not work out. We do not usually get a list of customers who got assistance from DHHS. That was a special data share agreement for the purpose of this collaborative.
Okay, so that 2% is actual customers that received assistance.
Customers that were in our analysis from 2019 to 2020 that received assistance in 2021.
Okay, got it. And that's for both, that covers both utilities?
Correct.
Okay. And then the significant, going down, same box, preview of initial findings, significant number of customers meet the arrears definition. How many customers is that? I mean, what does a significant number mean?
I can pull that up real quickly. Yeah, I have it open here. So for the 2019 overall, it was, sorry, the document is loading.
It's about 15% overall.
15%, which amounted to over 366, or actually over 360,000 total customers, of which 214,000 did not qualify as low income. But
okay, wait a minute, Mr. McElmoyle.
Yeah.
Say those numbers again. So we're at 15%, and then you translated that into an actual number of customers.
Yes, it was roughly 362,000 based on the company's analysis total.
362, and then the 200 and some thousand. Say that number again.
Yeah, of those 362,000, over 210,000 did not meet the low income classification.
Okay. Got it. And those numbers, I assume those numbers are, again, we're looking at DEC and DEP combined.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let me see if any of my colleagues have questions for Mr. McElmoy, Mr. Richardson. Questions? Commissioner Hughes.
Yeah, I'm encouraged to hear that you were able to get the data sharing so that we could look at LIHEAP on top of some of your other metrics. I'm curious if you have the data available also to look what you have traditionally called vulnerable customers, that those are the customers that normally would be subject to a moratorium cutoff. Are they in your database, and was there any ability to use that or see the overlap between LIHEAP and that customer segment?
I am not aware of how we have defined vulnerable customers in the past. So that's not something that we have analyzed.
Okay, thank you. I think the definition has been expanded in this over COVID, but I think there was from what I understand, there was a set definition that was pretty stringent, so I wouldn't expect the number to be very high. But I'd be interested in at least just knowing how many customers that is.
Yeah, if anyone at Duke Energy has any more information,
Thanks.
please feel free to speak up.
Good morning, Commissioner Hughes. I think what you're asking us is for the customers that would normally qualify for the moratorium based on Rule R1211, have we done any specific analysis on that subset of customers?
Yes, just because they weren't subject to disconnection. So when we're looking at kind of number of disconnections and later on some of the other metrics, I just was curious how quote effective that was or what influence that was having at either generating arrears, possibly because they're not being disconnected, or reducing disconnections.
No, that's a good question. We can follow up. I think too, one thing, as Arnie mentioned, we have the LIHEAP and SIP customers. And the main reason why we have those customers is primarily because we enrolled them in the moratorium that you're mentioning. And so the moratorium would include anybody that would, I would say, normally qualify based on R1211, along with the LIHEAP and SIP customers. And we can go and confirm if their analysis for just those customers who are not LIHEAP and SIP that qualify for the moratorium is any different than what we've shared today, and follow back up.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that, or just, in the next update or next report, just knowing what percentage of your population, since that has been a definition, so to speak, in the past of a vulnerable population set. I'm just really curious how big that is and
I think the vulnerable customer definition would extend beyond the number of LIHEAP SIP customers that were captured in the analysis, because it also includes, for the purposes of the moratorium, also includes whether there's elderly or disabled household members, as well as just general, they can demonstrate financial hardship that prevents them from being able to afford their bill or a 6-month payment arrangement. So
yeah, from what I understand, that's expanded definition, but back in pre-pandemic, it was a pretty narrow definition that you had to have, it wasn't a or, it was an and. So I would think it'd be pretty small. But if you have both, I would also love to see what the expanded definition did to those numbers, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. We can pull that information together, and I think what plan to share at minimum in our next quarterly update report.
All right, we've got Commissioner Gray. Did you have a question?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Commissioner McKissick.
Thank you. And I appreciate the statistics you've provided. They are certainly helpful, insightful as it relates to analyzing this data. You spoke of energy intensity at one point, and you spoke of how it was a factor among low-income families. Could you provide a little bit more insight in terms of what that meant in terms of the analysis of the data that you were reviewing?
I can take a stab if you want, Rory. So again, with energy intensity, we looked at the kWh per square foot that we have for all of our customers. And then we were able to compare that against different FPL levels and different demographics. And what we found was that most, if not all, categories in the demographics in the housing saw a higher energy intensity for our lower income customers. So for every housing type, for owner renter status, for all the different ages and races and stuff like that, we were seeing a increased energy intensity for low income customers. That was a very consistent finding.
And the follow-up would be this. So they were consuming greater amount of electricity, regardless of category and type of housing.
Not necessarily more energy overall, but more energy per square foot.
More energy per square foot. Okay, got it.
So that doesn't necessarily mean they had higher, higher kWh on their bills, but when you brought in the square footage, you see that they use more per square foot, which shows, the overall intensity and how much it takes to get electricity to that home.
And the square footage data came from Axiom? Is that correct? Okay, all right. Secondly, you spoke about there being racial disparities in how Black and Hispanic families face cutoffs. What exactly did the data show?
Arnie, I can cover that one if you'd like.
Yeah.
So we started with seeing that African American households, for example, that a third of all African American identified households met Duke Energy's arrears definition. And when we dove down into how that related to income and disconnections for non-pay, we have an additional analysis in our assessment that, and just to use the African American example, for instance, African American households are 1.6 times more likely to be low income than white households. They are 2.6 times more likely to meet the arrears definition and 3.1 times more likely to be disconnected for non-pay. And so when you look at that, especially that increase from the income comparison to the disconnect for non-pay, if they're only 60% more likely to be low income, but 210% more likely to be disconnected for non-pay, there's something else going on there that's not obviously explained by income. And then we saw the same with, and so you can compare African American households to Asian and Hispanic as well, and you see generally the same trend. And we did the same thing with Hispanic households, and we saw less of a disparity than with African American households, but still a clear disparity that's not explained by income.
And I'll just add that that's really one of the things we're hoping to get out of the statistical models that we are developing. It will help us understand the correlation between these different variables and hopefully understand why we are seeing that and what is really driving arrears and disconnects in our low income customer base.
Well, it'd be helpful to hear what that analysis reveals as this moves forward. And while it may be statistically verifiable, it may be attributable to factors far beyond what would be obvious.
Yes, we're very excited for those results as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brown-Bland.
Yes, to the extent that you have mentioned that that you've taken into account energy intensity, does that account for the customers that use natural gas and propane?
Yes, we have looked at heating source as well. Right now, that is a separate descriptive variable. So we did look at energy usage, energy intensity, all the other trends around disconnects and stuff like that on our all electric customers and non-all electric customers. The statistical modeling is where we'll really start to see how that those different heating sources interact with some of the specific demographics in housing though.
Thank you.
And the analysis did show a higher energy intensity for all electric homes, as you would expect. So for the households served by the companies on the electric side, we're not able to actually see what their full energy intensity is from a BTU, British thermal unit standpoint. So, you know, just understanding that we have customers who are not all electric, that their total energy burden or their total energy cost and how that relates to their ability to pay the separate bills for electric and non-electric heating sources is just something that we're not going to be able to capture, or the Arnie's team is not going to be able to capture, but still exists and is impacting people's ability to afford one or both of those bills.
All right. Any additional questions for these gentlemen? All right, Mr. McEmoyle, Mr. Richardson, thank you for your comments today, and we will move next to hear from Subteam B.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Mitchell, Commissioners. I am Lamisha Whittington, Deputy Director for Advanced Carolina, and it is a privilege to appear before you today as a co-lead and representative of Subteam B of the Low Income Affordability Collaborative. And for brevity, I will refer to the collaborative as LIAC, L-I-A-C, the acronym. Joining me and available to answer any questions the Commission may have is Subteam B co-lead Kanisha Barnes, Energy Policy Management Director for Duke Energy. Subteam B consists of 19 LIAC members across 9 different organizations representing state agencies, large energy users, nonprofit, environmental advocates, and solar industry. The purpose of Subteam B is to develop suggested metrics or definitions for affordability and to explore trends in affordability. The goal of Subteam B is to position the LIAC to develop suggested metrics or definitions for affordability in the context of the company's provision of service in its North Carolina service territory and to explore trends in affordability. As the most efficient means of achieving this goal, Subteam B determined a framework around the subteam task. These tasks for clarity include identify and compile information to be investigated, align on questions to be answered, identify any expert input and opinions needed to support LIAC education for our subteam members, suggest metrics and definitions for affordability, and then finally prepare and present suggestions to the broader LIAC for consideration. Our framework to support these tasks include a meeting frequency of once a week for a duration of 1 hour with a specific time frame to accomplish each task I aforementioned. In the spirit of cross collaboration, as co-leads of Subteam B, we meet frequently with co-leads of Subteam A, as you previously heard, and they're conducting of analysis, Duke Energy, state agencies, public staff, and of course, other organizations to compile the necessary research requested by members of Subteam B to achieve the ultimate goal of developing suggested metrics for affordability. Now, as charged by the Commission order, Subteam B is to answer the question, how is affordability defined and applied to other jurisdictions, particularly for those with similar legal and regulatory frameworks? The research that has been conducted by our team thus far has shown that the term affordability has not been broadly defined or applied. Finding that there is no uniform definition or application of affordability across several jurisdictions throughout the country, our subteam has determined to develop a conceptual approach to provide a framework for looking into existing eligibility metrics and creating ways to build upon them. The definition, context, and application of affordability can vary by factors such as geography, household composition, and a household's ability to withstand bills or unexpected costs. To that end, we are currently exploring metrics for existing utility or state programs designed to address affordability. Understanding the complexity of defining affordability, our team is developing a general concept and framework to present to LIAC. It is important to have a concept for affordability as it will drive how eligibility metrics and program goals are developed and are justified. In order to do this, we began our initial phase of research understanding energy burden before diving into existing utility and state programs in our analysis. Energy burden is a formula widely used to better understand affordability barriers for households. Energy burden is the cost of household energy expenditures relative to overall household income, and then this is represented as a percentage. And so energy burden is a commonly used formula. And while we have not, as a sub-team, determined yet our goal percentage as the work is ongoing for an affordable energy burden, we understand that a widely accepted threshold for an affordable energy burden is 6% of gross household income. But again, we have not determined yet our goal percentage as recommendations for LIAC. That is underway. We understood in order to evaluate existing programs and to consider gaps and potential shortcomings in reaching various types of households, it was important to have a formula designed to assess the percentage of financial hardship on low-income ratepayers. Following our research into energy burden with subject matter experts, we then started the next phase of exploring program eligibility requirements for existing low-income assistance programs and created an internal matrix to compare the components of each program's program eligibility requirements. This in an effort to help inform the team's recommendations of quantitative and qualitative low-income program eligibility requirements. Programs to date that we have assessed in our internal matrix and their eligibility requirements include the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program, or LIEP, Crisis Intervention Program, CIP, Housing Opportunities and Prevention of Evictions Program, Food and Nutrition Services, State Weatherization and Heating and Air Repair and Replacement Program, DE Weatherization and Equipment Replacement, and DE Neighborhood Energy Saver. Additionally, we have worked in tandem with the appropriate agencies to answer questions posed weekly by Sub-Team B members to better understand these existing programs. To date, we have developed an additional internal matrix to analyze now the similarities and differences between the programs I have previously mentioned and the program eligibility criteria so that we can best identify the shortcomings and benefits of each program, and will continue this analysis through the end of this month. In this evaluation, some of the eligibility requirements we've analyzed include application process, discussions around owner versus renter, income level criteria, specifically federal poverty level and area median income. We are still in this phase of analyzing data to inform the qualitative and quantitative low-income program eligibility to develop principles and a framework to define affordability in the absence of affordability being applied in other jurisdictions. In the spirit of cross-collaboration, Sub-Team B aim is to assess existing programs and develop consensus on quantitative and qualitative metrics that can support Sub-Team C and D in their priority to minimize administrative costs and streamline a one-stop shop application process for customers. Sub-Team B's documentation of findings are underway, and we expect to brief LIAC on affordability trends in March. And so on behalf of Sub-Team B, I thank you for your time, labor, and attention this morning. And I would like to invite, for my remaining last few minutes, my colleague, Kanisha Barnes, to include additional comments as necessary in the completion of this report on behalf of Sub-Team B. Following her comments, Kanisha and I will be happy to answer any questions the Commission may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lamisha. I think the summary I will just share is, as Lamisha just spoke to, is we've worked diligently with members of Sub-Team B, which is a very diverse group of individuals from different perspectives, to explore across the country. I know Lamisha mentioned specifically programs in North Carolina that we've looked at, but we've looked at programs across the country, whether they be state programs and utility programs to address or assist low-income customers. And consistent with what she shared is we have not at this point identified any program that has specifically defined affordability or definition for it. We have identified programs that have put targets in place, whether it be energy burden or other metrics of what they would like to do to address or help low-income customers with energy usage challenges and paying their bills. So I then will pause and see if there are any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barnes and Ms. Whittington. I'll check in with my colleagues to see if there are questions. Commissioner Duffley.
I think I heard you state that that the group felt that 6% was a proper energy burden. And my question is, what percent of Duke ratepayers have a higher than 6% energy burden?
Lamisha, you want me to jump in?
Sure, and I did want to provide clarity, Kanisha, if you don't mind answering the second part.
Yes.
Clarity, as a Sub-Team B, we haven't come to a consensus, just to be to clarify. We understand in our analysis that commonly used a metric, to your point, is 6%, and for higher at-risk is 10.9%. But as far as a Sub-Team B, we have not come to that consensus on our threshold for recommendations for that percentage. And then I'll turn over to you, Kanisha.
Thank you for that clarification, but if you would follow up with the percentage above the 6%, please.
Yes, so Commissioner Duffley, that's information we don't have. I know that in some of the analysis we've looked at, I know that Rory and Arnie mentioned energy intensity, but we also have had some conversations based on analysis, energy burden. So that's something that we can follow up with. And I think to Lamicia's point is depending on the program, whether it is a state program or utility program, if there is a target energy burden, it does vary. But we will look based on the analysis that's been completed for the customers, the low-income customers that we've been talking through, we can look and determine what is that that energy burden and provide that information back to you all.
Thank you.
And Arnie can correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, this is Rory McLemoyle. Energy burden, I believe, is going to be part of the next round of the analysis.
Yeah, that is mostly correct. We'll be looking at electric burden because we do not have the full energy cost, but we do plan on releasing some electric burden information.
All right, Commissioner McKissick?
Perhaps that last follow-up response was going to address the question I had. When you said 6%, whether you were looking at the totality of utilities, including water, sewer, natural gas, or on a family, but it sounds like what you're trying to get to is a percentage based upon electric uses. Is that what I'm to understand?
That's correct, Commissioner McKissick. That's correct.
Okay. That provides the clarity I was looking for. Thank you.
And Commissioner McKissick, just as a follow-up to that, and I know that Rory and Arnie I shared some information around energy intensity, but just as a reminder, the analysis that we are looking at as part of what the commission has approved for Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress is specific to electric. Recognizing that even in the most recent rate cases for Piedmont Natural Gas and Public Service of North Carolina, they have joined the collaborative to participate, listen, and learn. But we have not this work that we're doing will not include gas analysis. I think those utilities will be determining if and what type of collaborative or how they would do any analysis of gas. But the work that we're doing with this program for the LIAC is specific to electric usage only.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarity.
Commissioner Hughes?
Just one more question related to the same topic. Do you feel, and I'm not sure who this would be a question for, that you have enough data to know what the heating source is reliably? I mean, I see that you have that in a lot of your analysis, so that down the road, if you did want to look at energy burden of electricity, you would at least be able to look at the energy burden for people that use all electric versus the energy burden of someone that, say, would use gas heat or gas water heat. And I'd be curious, just the last question, if because I think part of it is you are looking at other jurisdictions. I would think that, especially in the Southeast, this is a common challenge with kind of the gas electric mix. Have you found anyone that has kind of sort of tackled this affordability definition question when you do have a lot of people that rely on gas, so that the data by itself is not particularly comprehensive?
I can jump in here if no one else minds. So great question. I wouldn't say that we have perfect data on heating source. In DEC, we do have two different rates, right? One for all electric homes, one for non-all electric homes, which we have pretty good confidence in. DEP does not have that rate difference, so there is some opportunity there. But in this new analytics group that we're standing up in our rates department under Lon Huber, we are trying to do some additional analytics on identifying heat source based on usage and temperature and stuff like that. So hopefully we can improve this data source in the future.
In addition to that, the analysis on heating source only captured the primary heating source for 83% of customers, given what I assume are deficiencies or just inability to capture that other 17% through the Axiom data. But that is, that's another 300,000 plus households, and that just kind of complicates the ability to achieve that full home energy cost burden. Although there are other data sources on a census tract level, federal estimates on the census tract level that have attempted to capture that.
I'll just end on a personal note. I know I'm part of the problem. I have dual fuel at my house, so I can actually have electric heat or gas heat. So I understand you're never going to kind of quite get it perfect, but I'm just moving toward it. Because when I try to look at metrics with my home versus anything that Duke presents, it's always very difficult to make any comparisons because sometimes I'll use electric heat during a month, and sometimes I use gas heat. It depends on the actual temperature on a day by day. So I don't know how many people there are like me, but I know I would be hard to analyze.
All right, any additional questions for Sub-Team B? All right, well, thank you, Sub-Team B. Let's move now to Sub-Team C.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Dietrich Clark, and I'm the Director of Housing and Energy Programs at the North Carolina Community Action Association, and I co-lead Sub-Team C with my friend and colleague, Ken Samatsky. Ken and I are both honored and humbled to be a part of the LIAC and leading the work of Sub-Team C as we investigate the strengths and weaknesses of existing rates, rate design, billing practices, customer assistance programs, and energy efficient affordability programs. I'm pleased to be before you today to share our progress. Over the past several months, Sub-Team C has embarked on a journey to work towards an organized and unified response to the Commission's orders. Many of the topics we have explored have been very complex. Over the past few months, our sub-team members have had good progress as we have learned about cost of service, cost causation, rate design, consumer consumption patterns, current statutory and regulatory policies, and the pros and cons of minimum bill charges and fixed charges, residential rate class settlements, segmentation, percentage of income programs, as well as existing Duke EE programs. Our Sub-Team C has gained better understanding of the Duke Energy low-income, energy-efficient offerings in the Carolinas, particularly the weatherization and equipment replacement program, the refrigerator replacement program, neighborhood energy saver program, and the low-income weatherization pay-for-performance pilot in Buncombe County, which have all helped to spark both dialogue and idea amongst sub-team members. And our team looks for new ideas and ways to address energy affordability for low-income families. Our team is currently exploring potential program expansion and innovative pilot program ideas, which include expanding the Duke Energy Carolinas weatherization program, as well as the energy burden pilot, the heat strip replacement pilot, and the multifamily direct install expansion. In a serious effort to effectively and thoughtfully address the orders raised by the Commission, Ken and I have created 5 distinctive mini working groups to focus on key requests from the Commission. Those working groups include success measures and impact, program impact, existing EE programs and energy burden, statutory and regulatory, rates and cost causation, and the DNP and disconnect working groups. The success measure and program impact working group is focused on identifying success criteria and key impact metrics that are most important when engaging the success and impact of low income programs. Ultimately, the success measures working group will provide a list of impact measures and program recommendations to Sub-Team C for discussion and overall consideration to the larger LIAC. The EE programs and energy burden working group is tasked with working with Duke to provide Sub-Team C with a comprehensive self-assessment of their existing programs. We're hoping to finalize the details of that request soon. And the statutory and regulatory working group is tasked with reviewing the statutory and regulatory appropriateness of implementing minimum bill concepts, PIP, segmentation of existing rate class, and expanding DEC's current SSI program to DEP. We expect a first draft from that group later this week. The rates and cost causation working group is aimed on providing Sub-Team C members with recommendations on cost causation and how cost of service allocations affect rate design and overall affordability. And lastly, the DNP and Disconnect Working Group is tasked with providing Subteam C members with direction on determining what practices and regulatory provisions related to disconnections should be modified and or revised. As you've heard, many of our working groups have started to develop preliminary drafts of their recommendations. So we expect to begin reviewing and finalizing those recommendations over the course of the next few weeks. As these many working groups narrow down their findings and recommendations, Ken and I will assemble Subteam C members together to discuss these proposals, targeted deadlines, and next steps. This concludes the updates for Subteam C, and I want to thank the Commission for the opportunity to provide, share our progress thus far.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clark. Let me check in and see if there are questions for Mr. Clark. Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you very much for that update. As I look down the list, it seems like you've done a great job of capturing the wide breadth of programs that are offered. There's one subset that I think come up a lot, at least in our discussions and some of what we've heard from Duke, that I don't see here that maybe you could comment on, and that's the collection method approaches, not billing, excuse me, not collection as in trying to collect from someone that hasn't paid, but more billing, particularly things like your budget billing program and your prepaid program, which I don't see them fitting on this list, but I think they're often presented to us as an effective, at least way of ameliorating cash flow problems, bill spikes in certain months, and it's just really intrigued me as I think the penetration for those programs has gotten fairly high or is getting higher every year. Where do they fit into this equation, both as a solution, but also as are they impacting some of the data that we're already seeing? So it's a long-winded question. I can clarify.
I guess in terms of what we've done is we're working with Duke now to assess, kind of do a self-assessment of all of those their specific programs. We feel they are, of course, best positioned to provide this group with information. So we are in the process of looking at, all of those different programs, but we don't have any information, related to that to date.
Okay, I realize probably more of a question for Duke, but hopefully that's coming or part of it.
I'll be glad to jump in, Dietrich, too, just to provide some additional information. So, Commissioner Hughes, great question. One of the things that you'll see is the programs that Dietrich has mentioned here have been truly programs that have been income qualified. So, quote, programs that we know are specifically qualified, designed to help customers that are low income. You've mentioned some great other programs, which are billing options that are not necessarily income qualified, but they could levelize a customer's bill where they could pay, the same amount for a certain amount a month. As you mentioned, budget billing. So because they weren't income qualified, we just haven't done that deep level of analysis. I think the other program that you mentioned as the DEC prepaid program, as a reminder, that program just rolled out late last, I think, fall is the time frame. The participation right now is pretty low, so we don't have what I would say even statistically valid data maybe to make conclusions on that program. But we can continue just to look at that just to see if there are any potential gaps in the data for future consideration as we continue to do this work with Subteam C.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Maybe prepay isn't something to look at, but the budget bill, budget billing has come up a lot. I think Duke has been advocating for it quite a bit. And also, I think it falls kind of interestingly in the middle of both the income qualified programs and the rate structure programs, because I think budget billing would send less pricing signals to customers than customers that don't participate in budget billing. So if you're talking about changing rate structures to send pricing signals to customers or relieving customers of certain payment, it would seem to be diluted if it was if the actual payment wasn't really, or was based on budget billing as much as it was based on the use and consumption during a particular month. So just things that I personally have been really curious about, and if they come up, great. Just some thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Great points. And we'll, like I said, we'll consider that as we continue to do the analysis work under Subteam C.
All right, any additional questions on the Subteam C effort? All right, thank you all. Let's move on then to Subteam D.
Hi, good morning, Chair Mitchell and Commissioners. I am Thad Cully, Senior Manager of Public Policy for Sunrun, and greatly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today as a co-chair and representative of Subteam D. Naturally, the affordability of energy rates is a constant consideration in the minds of stakeholders across the full range of ongoing working groups. The purpose of Subteam D, however, is to support the Commission's directive relating to the engagement and coordination among three specific collaboratives, and that is the Energy Efficiency Collaborative, LIAC, and the ongoing Comprehensive Rate Review, which I'll refer to as CRR. So to the extent there are complementary workflows occurring within each of these efforts, a goal of Subteam D is to raise visibility among the several collaboratives of what is happening in each, and to gather and disseminate feedback on what steps could be taken to address gaps, develop solutions, and avoid duplication of work. And to this end, Subteam D planned an initial joint collaborative meeting with all three groups. While we began planning this in early December, we had a session on January 26th. And I want to pause here and recognize the work of our co-chair, Paula Hemmer, who's a senior engineer at the NC State Energy Office, who really kind of took the laboring oar of organizing the agenda and the meeting format. So lots of kudos and praise for her work. I'm pleased to report back that this joint collaborative meeting was well attended, and I think indeed did provide valuable feedback to all of the sub-teams about their ongoing work. In total, we hosted about 147 participants and focused the session on providing like a general overview of the objectives and current work of each of these three collaboratives. Each collaborative was given a 30-minute time window to give a presentation and to provide an update on their respective work and kind of ongoing work streams. The meeting then shifted to a smaller group breakout via virtual breakout rooms where the facilitators captured input from participants around the areas of intersection between these collaboratives. Participants were asked to reflect on presentations and share their impressions based on that, on the gaps and opportunities that remain, as well as potential solutions to affordability issues that they wanted to highlight for this now convened broader group. While by the end of that breakout session, I think we had accumulated several dozen comments identifying overlapping gaps and opportunities, and at least 19, I think, overlapping solution areas. And so with the caveat that this is not going to be an exhaustive list or ranked in any order of importance, I wanted to provide just a small sampling of some of the feedback we received. On gaps and opportunities, we had stakeholders raise some of the following questions, like how do we frame customer challenges for affordability? As one stakeholder observed, a one-size-fits-all approach is really hard to match with the individual challenges and circumstances that customers with high energy burden may be facing. How do we get access to hard-to-reach customers? How do we streamline the process of program enrollment or assistance to make it quick and easy from the customer's perspective? I think this was really a common theme throughout. How do we balance utility administrative costs and program delivery to maximize benefit to customers? How do we secure durable, sustainable funding streams to pay for these programs, including potential programs like a percentage of income payment plan? Now, on the solution side, at least one stakeholder noted that we need to improve, expand, and better integrate existing customer offerings to make sure they're reaching more people. And this would include among the suite of energy efficiency programs, available rate designs, and other policies. I think there's a view that we need to have support for longer term solutions on these fronts with energy efficiency, like helping home funds on-bill financing programs. Administratively, one stakeholder suggested we should streamline and create a one-stop shop for applying for assistance and services. Make sure that complementary programs are just that they're additive to existing resources. Create data sharing with other administrator agencies to better coordinate assistance, and then consider auto enrollment based on receipt of customers of other types of government support. And I'm going to kind of cut this short here, but based on this feedback, LIAC has identified cross-collaborative liaisons for the work going forward. And this includes representatives from Duke, public staff, and the other organizations represented within our collaborative. Now, these liaisons are going to be tasked with sharing updates with the other collaboratives in the EE and CRR collaboratives from any of the relevant LIAC work products that are coming to fruition now, and to report back to LIAC on any notable updates from those other groups. Starting with the next LIAC workshop, there will be a standing agenda item to give space for these liaisons to provide updates as needed. And additionally, I'd note that CRR and LIAC collaboratives have made a public portal page where collaborative meeting material will be posted for public access. And finally, I want to note that our hope with Subteam D is to recognize the importance of cross-collaborative dialogue as there are opportunities to leverage and optimize the work of stakeholders across these many collaboratives. We do this with a sensitivity, the significant time commitment that stakeholders are making. And a core goal going forward is to streamline the channels of communication while preserving opportunities to participate and transparency for those stakeholders that have both the interest and ability to engage. So again, on behalf of Subteam D, thank you for your time this morning, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Coley. Let me check in with commissioners to see if there are questions related to Subteam D work. All right, looks like, Mr. Coley, there are no questions for you, but I will say I heard some interesting things in your remarks this morning. I'm looking forward to see and hear more from you all, and appreciate your updating us today. All right, anything else? Anything else from Duke or from any of the participants in the Affordability Collaborative effort? All right, let me check in with commissioners one last time to see if there are questions.
Just thank you. It's really encouraging to see all the great work you're doing, and so I really appreciate it.
And just following up on Mr. Coley's point about investment of time and resources, Commission recognizes the work, time, and effort that's going into this, and looks forward to the end result. Appreciates everyone's hard work here. All right, with that, we will sign off. Thank you very much, everybody.